Hello, adult Sunday school leader. This Sunday we celebrate the event that distinguishes us from all other religions, and that's the resurrection from the dead of Jesus. Everyone has a birth story, and many religious leaders have suffered, of course, and even died for their beliefs or their faith, but only Jesus rose from the dead. And that's what we're studying this week, of course. We're in that fifth lesson in the unit called It's All About Jesus. This is the resurrection of Jesus is the lesson title, and the focal passage is out of Luke 24. The point of the lesson is that Jesus rose again to give us victory over death. Well, our first set of scriptures is Luke 24, verses 1 through the first part of verse 6. It's called 6a. So on the first day of the week, and of course that's Sunday, some women went in very early. They went very early in the morning to see Jesus' tomb. Now, they would have been great Sunday school students. You know, there's some ladies in my Sunday school class who don't like to get up early, but these ladies got up early to go to Jesus' tomb. And, you know, women, they played a great part in Jesus' ministry. If you think about this, to whom did angels or an angel appear before Jesus' conception? Well, it's to Mary, of course. How about after the crucifixion? It was these women here. And these women, they took spices that they had prepared to anoint the body of Jesus, which was a common practice. But they were in for a big surprise. Well, actually, several surprises. We're going to see that here in a minute. Well, we see in the previous chapter that this tomb was new. No one had ever been placed in it before. The beginning of Jesus' earthly life started in a virgin's womb, from which he emerged the promised Messiah. And at the end, he was placed in an empty tomb and emerged our victorious Lord. So from the virgin womb to the empty tomb, that's the story of our Jesus. Well, can you imagine the emotions these women, what they were experiencing on the way to the tomb? I'm sure they had a little bit of fear, maybe some sadness, as they recalled just a few days ago, the death of Jesus. Maybe even some depression, some dread of having to see the body of their dear friend. There's some uncertainty. You know, how are we going to open the tomb? How are we going to roll the stone away? Will there soldiers there? Are they going to chase us away? All these things are probably going through their mind. And as they got nearer to the tomb, they wondered out loud who would roll away the stone for them. Now, Joseph of Arimathea had rolled a large stone in front of the tomb's entrance, which was common then, and it was to keep out scavenging animals, of course. But who's going to roll away the stone for them? But you know what? It didn't matter, because when they got there, the stone was already rolled away. That was surprise number one. Let's make sure our class realizes that the stone was not rolled away so Jesus could get out. It wasn't for his benefit. It wasn't allow him to leave. No, it was for the benefit of those who came to look for him to realize that he had risen. Jesus' post-resurrection body did not have the same physical limitations that he had before, and we're going to see that here in just a little bit. So how did that stone get moved? Matthew 28:2 tells us that there was an earthquake and an angel moved it. The women entered the tomb, probably cautiously, and found that Jesus wasn't there. That's surprise number 2. And then there appeared 2 men. Okay, there's surprise number 3. Now in Luke's account, there were 2 men in clothes that their clothes gleamed like lightning, it says, and they spoke to him. These, of course, were angels. Now another gospel account listed just 1 man. Now here's the thing. We shouldn't let some slight variations in the different accounts worry us. It shouldn't be a concern. Each gospel writer chose to emphasize different aspects of the story. Remember last week I talked about the different inscriptions on the cross and how you put them all together and it came up with the whole thing. Just each gospel writer kind of chose to emphasize one particular part of that cross inscription. And so I'm thinking that's what's happening here as well. And to me, this makes the resurrection story even more credible. Here's the thing. If you're like me, you've probably watched enough police dramas, heard some true crime podcasts to know that when the accounts of 2 or more witnesses line up exactly, there's no variation at all, then that's some cause to suspect that maybe they got together and to get their story straight. So it's expected that there would be some slight variations between the stories of these eyewitness accounts. But the basic facts line up. Women came to the tomb. The stone was rolled away. An angel spoke to them. Jesus wasn't there. Now the angels asked the women, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He's not here. He is risen." That takes us to our next set of verses, which is the last part of verse 6, 6b through verse 8. The angel then reminded the women that, hey, this should not come as a surprise. Jesus he told you guys, he told his followers that the religious leaders would persecute him, execute him, and that he would rise from the dead on the third day. Now, we can look in Mark 8:31 and Mark 9:31 just as a couple of examples of when he told his disciples this. And when the angel said this, that light bulb came on. They remembered. And they remembered what Jesus said. And what he said wasn't just hyperbole. It was true. It was factual. Now let's look at those last set of verses. We're down in the same chapter, Luke 24, down in verses 38 through 43. But in my class, I'm going to go back and include verses 36 and 37 as well, just to set a little bit of context. Jesus' followers, they're having this conversation about how he had recently appeared to others. And right in the middle of that conversation, Jesus appeared to them. He wasn't there, and then he was. Now remember, like I said earlier, he didn't have the same physical limitations as before. And this is probably the same instance that's recorded over in John chapter 20, verses 19 and 20, where Jesus suddenly appeared to the disciples who were behind locked doors. They were scared. They were hiding from the authorities. They were behind locked doors, and Jesus immediately appeared. But when he comes to the disciples, he gives that typical Hebrew greeting, shalom, peace be with you. And even though they had just been talking about Jesus appearing to other people, his sudden appearance here frightened them, and they thought they were seeing a ghost. Now, notice here, Jesus didn't scold them. In fact, he offered them physical proof. Look at me. Look at my hands. Look at my feet. These are the marks where the nails pierced my flesh just a few days ago. Go ahead and touch me. I'm not a ghost. I am a flesh and bones person. And those disciples, they were overcome with a host of emotions. They were scared. They were hiding from the authorities. They were fearing the same thing would happen to them that happened to their leader. And then their leader, the one they just saw tortured and executed just a few days before, he was standing before them. Yes, he said this would happen, but there's no way. There's no way this healthy-looking man or ghost or whatever is in front of us here. There's no way that could be our Jesus that died that horrible death just a few days ago. It looks like him. There's nail prints, but it's just not adding up. It's just not computing. There's a final proof. Jesus asks for something to eat, and he's given a piece of broiled fish, and he ate it. An apparition, a ghost, doesn't eat. This indeed was Jesus. Well, let's talk a minute about the nail prints on Jesus' body. When we attend a funeral of a friend or a loved one who had maybe some kind of disease or disability, we might hear the officiant say something like, oh, they no longer have to worry about the cancer or being blind or being bound to a wheelchair anymore, whatever their condition was. But here, we have Jesus bearing the scars that he received while he was alive. Does that mean that we too are going to bear the scars of our physical existence? Well, my thought is no, that these will be the only scars in heaven. Kind of like that tear-jerker of a song by Casting Crowns by the same name, Scars in Heaven. I believe that Jesus will bear the scars in heaven as an eternal reminder to his followers of what he did for us in order for us to be with him. Now, do we really understand what good news the resurrection is? I think if you've been in church for a while, if you've been raised in church and you've been a Christian for a long time, I think a lot of us have heard the Christmas story, we've heard the Easter story so much, we're not immune to it, but we've lost that wonder of it. Yes, we believe it, and we're grateful, but the message just isn't as powerful to us maybe as it once was. So here are the facts. Jesus died. Dead. No life in his body. And now, guess what? He's alive. And it's not because he was revived through CPR or anything else. He was dead and buried in this tomb. And now in our story this week, he's not only alive, but he's alive and thriving. He's eating. He's walking around. He couldn't barely talk just a couple of days ago. This is indeed a miracle. So what does that mean for us that Jesus rose from the dead? Well, we see in Genesis and in Romans that death is the ultimate punishment for our sin. Jesus died. He paid that price for sin. And now, since he rose again after dying, he defeated death, showing that he is greater than both sin and its punishment. And so by our trusting in him, his victory becomes our victory. And just like the point of the lesson states, Jesus rose again to give us victory over death. Next week, we're going to be in the last lesson in this unit. It's going to be called The Mission of Jesus Shared. It's going to be out of the last part of this same chapter out of Luke 24. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to pray for and with your class this week.